Hello, everybody, and welcome to the show that I, your host, David Woodruff, lovingly call the Woodruff Report. So, I wasn't actually planning to make another podcast this early. I was going to wait a week or so, kind of try to establish a regiment like weekly. But the Rose Bowl game really forced me into action. What a game! USC Penn State battled it out in Pasadena, and it turned out to be an absolutely incredible win for the Trojans, coming out on top 52-49. And I have to admit, I'm a big USC Trojans fan, so obviously this game will sit and feel better in my heart than it will in Nittany Lions fans' heart. But still, even if I was an avid Penn State supporter, I think I would still have respect because this was just such a great game. Two great programs with established legacies going after each other, and it really proved to me that bowl games matter, not just the college football playoff. A lot of people thought, a lot of experts, and I'm sure a lot of just every college football fans in general thought that the college football playoff would really render the rest of the bowl games obsolete. But I think that this Rose Bowl game really proved how much the players care about these games, even though they may not be competing for a national championship. They're competing for pride. In the case of USC, they're competing for a Rose Bowl championship, and also they're competing for the Pac-12 conference. And in the same way, Penn State was competing for the Big Ten Conference. They're trying to show the rest of the nation what their conferences are all about and how good the competition is. And these bowl games are really important because they show how these conferences stack up against each other. I mean, take, for example, if Penn State had beaten USC 52-0. That would have really said something about not only the Big Ten Conference, how strong it is if Penn State was able to beat one of the best teams in the Big 12 52-0, but it also proves a lot about the Pac-12, that maybe it's not as strong as people think it is. And I think that really affects next year and how the committee will look at things. So that's just one reason why bowl games are important. And this game also showed why. So it was a back-and-forth game. Everything started out wrong for Penn State, starting from the opening kickoff, which bounced in front of the returner and bounded across the goal line and was scooped up by the Penn State returner, who fell on it at like the 3 or 4 yard line. And the next play from scrimmage, Penn State threw an interception. USC did not capitalize on that drive, but on Penn State's next, USC missed a field goal. But then on Penn State's first play of the next drive, they threw another interception, which USC capitalized on and got a field goal off of. So the beginning of the game looked great for Trojan fans, horrible for Penn State fans. No one saw a 52-49 score coming. It looked like the defenses really were battling it out. So I'm not going to summarize the whole game. I really recommend, if you haven't seen it, watching it. ESPN2 sometimes shows replays of great games, and I'm sure they'll have the Rose Bowl game replaying. I supremely recommend going and taking a look at the game. Lots of talent on both sides, and the two quarterbacks really making good cases for themselves next year. Trace McSorley of the Nittany Lions, great quarterback with great skill position players around him and an incredible running back, Saquon Barkley. And then on the USC side, Sam Darnold, the freshman, who has established himself as one of the best quarterbacks not only in the Pac-12 but in the entire nation. And it's kind of a preview of two people who I think could be in the Heisman running next year, in Sam Darnold and Saquon Barkley. So other highlights from the game: Penn State at one point scored touchdowns on 3 consecutive plays, spanning before halftime to the 2 drives after halftime. And USC was down 14 points in the fourth quarter before tying it up, and then on a late interception, kicking a game-winning field goal, Matt Bormeister with a tough kick from the left hash, and the lefty curled it in. So I just want to talk a little bit about lefty kickers. Mad respect for lefty kickers. I mean, they're kind of a dying breed, or they were never really that much of a breed in general. But the lefty kicker, how about it? Still mad respect, and it's great to see. It's kind of the same thing with a left-handed quarterback. Whenever you see a left-handed quarterback succeed, it's just a beautiful thing to watch. Michael Vick was just poetry in motion when he'd unleash a deep ball with that left hand just swinging. It's kind of the same thing in Major League Baseball. If you think about who has the best swings in all of the MLB, it's all left-handed batters, and it's kind of weird. Maybe it's just because their momentum moves them towards first base, but it's interesting how the sweetest swings in all of the MLB come from the left-hand side of the plate. So anyway, kind of got off on a tangent there, but great game. USC won 52-49. I actually went to a Warriors game, so I had to leave in the fourth quarter, and it was killing me. By the way, Warriors are really good at basketball, if you were wondering. They kind of annihilated the Nuggets in the game that I went to. I also recommend watching their games if you want to see good ball movement, etc. They're all very good at basketball. But I had to leave in the middle of the fourth quarter, and I came back, and at like 11 o'clock at night, I watched Bormeister hit that 40-plus yard field goal, and I just went crazy in my living room because I'm a USC fan, as I already said. But great game, 52-49, and inspired me to make this podcast for you. So I've got to admit, I feel a little bit guilty just making a podcast about one event. So I figured that I'd maybe talk about some other things. I'll talk about the college football playoff results and then also NFL playoffs. I'll start with the NFL playoffs, and I'll focus specifically on the Raiders, who are having kind of an interesting thing going down. After Derek Carr messed up his leg in their regular season finale, or their second to last regular season game, Matt McGloin, the legend himself, came in to relieve him of his duties for the last game, and it looked like the McGloin was going to lead the Raiders through their first playoffs in a while, but he messed up his shoulder. So Connor Cook, the third string man on the depth chart out of Michigan State, is going to start against the Texans during Wild Card Weekend this Saturday. And this is going to be interesting because you never know when a rookie's just going to be fantastic. Example, Dak Prescott, Dallas Cowboys. Or they're just going to be terrible. You never know whether they're going to shine under the lights or flicker because of a lack of experience. But I think that, in my opinion, starting Connor Cook is actually a better decision than starting Matt McGloin. Because with Matt McGloin, you know what you're going to get. You're going to get a slightly disappointing stat line with maybe one or two picks. With Connor Cook, at least it's a mystery. There's like an 80% chance that he's going to be worse than McGloin, but you never know if he's just going to be this fantastic guy. I mean, if Drew Bledsoe hasn't got hurt, no one would have gotten to see Tom Brady, and what if Connor Cook becomes the next Tom Brady? The thing is, you never know. With Matt McGloin, you did know. And this is the thing that really bothers me about coaches who, for example, Rams coach Jeff Fisher, when he didn't start Jared Goff at the beginning of the season, he started Case Keenum, and you know what you're going to get from Case Keenum, and he showed it for the whole season. The disappointing stat line with the one or two picks and maybe a touchdown here and there. At least give the team a chance with a question mark at the quarterback position. So Texans Raiders on Saturday, going to be a great game. The Chiefs won the AFC West on the final day, so they actually won home field advantage. Of course, the Patriots made the playoffs. What's new there? So this is what Wild Card Weekend is shaping up to look like. Oakland is going to be at Houston. Detroit is going to be at Seattle. That was a fantastic Monday night game, by the way, going off on another side tangent. Detroit versus Green Bay for the division title. Aaron Rodgers, I've never actually sat down and watched one of his games, or I have, but I haven't in a while, and he just reminded me how insane he was. His pocket movement is absolutely incredible. Detroit just could not keep him in the pocket. He was running around. It was like he had eyes in the back of his head. He could just sense pressure, and he was just running around making plays to his band of not very good wide receivers. So Detroit is going to CenturyLink at Seattle. That's always a tough matchup. Miami, kind of a surprise team led by another backup quarterback, is going to Pittsburgh. And the New York Giants play at Green Bay in the frigid temperatures at Lambeau. So that's what the wild card weekend looks like. Most of the home teams are favored, and actually all the home teams are favored in these games. In my opinion, the best game is going to be Detroit at Seattle, just because Detroit is going to be able to score and move the ball against that dynamic Seahawks defense. So it could become a bit of a shootout. And New York Giants at Green Bay is going to be a great game just because it's going to be cold and snowy, and it's two pretty high-powered offenses with Odell Beckham Jr. and Aaron Rodgers. So I'm interested to see whether that will be more of a shootout or more of a defensive game in the snow and windy weather at Lambeau. So moving on to the college football playoff, and the two favorites won their games. Alabama beat Washington, and Clemson annihilated Ohio State. So it gives us a rematch of last year's national championship, and it figures to be another very intriguing matchup. Washington actually started out pretty well against Alabama, taking the lead, but as Alabama always does to the teams it plays, the Tide washed away and beat them down by the end of the game. So the Huskies actually ended up putting up more of an effort than Ohio State did against Clemson. Ohio State ended up getting shut out and beat by 30-plus points. So Clemson played much better than I think a lot of people would have expected, and their defense really showed that it's dynamic and it can maybe slow down Alabama's attack led by Jalen Hurts. So it figures to be a less high-scoring game than last year's affair, just because the Alabama defense is so great and gets so many takeaways, and the Clemson defense is peaking at the right time after they're shut out of one of the most high-powered offenses in the country in Ohio State. But I still think that both the quarterbacks are going to have great games, and this game might end 35-31, with I think Clemson coming out on top, just because Deshaun Watson is so lights out, and you know that he shows up for games like this. So that wraps up the Woodruff Report, this surprise episode. I hope you enjoyed this. I'm still going to try to come at you weekly, but the Rose Bowl game really inspired me to do this podcast. Special thanks to Penn State and USC. Also to Matt McGloin. I'm rooting for him. I hope he gets better. Same with Derek Carr. I gave you a bit of the AFC and NFC wildcard picture and what wildcard weekend is going to look like. I also wrapped up the college football playoff. So I hope you enjoyed this surprise episode of Woodruff Report. I'm your host, David Woodruff. Thanks for tuning in. Goodbye.